All right, listen, thank you so much for coming to the event today. It's firstly brilliant that everyone is here. It's always great to do in-person events. I'm a huge evangelist of them. And the reason why is because we are so plugged in to the internet these days. We are at risk of being overly dependent on digital information. Now, digital information is great, but there's one condition which I think you need to be aware of. If it's digital information, it's produced information, which means that there's another thing behind that, producing some narrative or some content that they want you to think is true. And that is inevitably the case. And I say that as someone who produces a shit ton of content. I want you to think a certain way. There's no question about that. The difference with in-person dialogue is that people's ability to control that narrative is far less obvious. You're having dialogue that no one's controlling. Just seeing everyone having a chat there for 20 minutes, no one was monitoring that, policing that, even generating that. You were doing it yourself and learning from each other. That's the only I think the only thing that we've got to lean on in this era where we're going to get submerged by generated and created content is this in-person collective exchange of information from human beings. So brilliant that you're all on Team Humanity, basically. So great to have you all here. Okay, let's talk about this topic here. I was having a chat with a few of you at the beginning, sort of in the networking piece here, about sort of the series that we've been running. This is actually the last of a 4-part series that we've been running with Happydance on the topic of employer branding and candidate experience, and how that's obviously been changing dramatically over the past 2 years or more, and changing through like multiple directions, you know. The economic environment has changed from the conversation we were having 2-3 years or so ago. The technology environment kind of changed at the same time. And these are causing candidates to change their expectations, change their behaviors. The questions for us in the recruiting side is how do we kind of understand what those changes are and in fact address some of those concerns, perhaps to relearn some of the lessons that we previously had booked away and said, okay, this is how you do EB, this is how you do recruitment, because maybe some of those old lessons aren't the way it works today. Classic example of this is reducing friction on apply. Remember that? I'm old enough to remember where that was the number one thing recruitment marketing, and you know, if you had a website or you had any kind of way to try and publish a job, your number one job was, your number one task was to say, how do I make it easier for that candidate to see this job and then apply to it? We don't want them to have to fill out a form. We don't want them to have to go through a horrible process. We want them to see, apply, boom, they're in pipeline. That's brilliant. That was best practice. We spent like, I don't know how much money we spent doing that. Lots of investment was spent trying to reduce the friction. But have we got to a point where the friction now is too low? Is it too easy to apply now? Because we're all overwhelmed by job applicants, aren't we? There's a fear factor in posting a job today. You know, you post a job and you're terrified as to what that's going to mean. It's going to mean your amount of time you're going to spend processing those applications is going to shoot through the roof. And some of us don't have a choice to have, let's say, a quiet way to recruit. You know, if you're a public sector organization or your company's made a commitment to publish jobs in order to try and increase the numbers of sort of different types of people to apply, then that's the way you're going to do it. How are you going to deal with the deluge? So we have a totally different set of questions to answer, to ask, should I say. And one of the questions I think I'd like you guys to think about is, what is the optimal degree of friction to apply? What type of friction is good friction? And what type of friction is bad friction? Can we discuss it in those terms? If you think about things that we truly value, we often have to spend a little bit of effort to get to them. You know, if you went out onto the street and just dished out your free food, for instance, and you're trying to hustle into a restaurant, people are going to treat that food for what it is, disposable stuff. They'll have a bite, throw it away, walk past most of the time. They won't care for it. They won't value the effort that's gone to produce that food. but you put it behind some sort of barrier and you say, hey, listen, we're running a discount, we're running something, there's a little bit of friction to it, suddenly you get more people interested. What is the correct degree of apply? Can the friction be part of your candidate experience design? And what is the good friction opposed to the bad friction? Bad friction, we know what that is. That's like applying to a job powered by Workday, right? Where you have to set up a new account every time you see the job, you have to fill it back in again, you have to pull everything in, type a load of fields out, horrible experience. We don't mean that type of friction, but we mean the sort of friction where, okay, the person has to put a little bit of effort in to discover whether it's actually the right decision to go through to the process. Right now, it's like too easy to just do a mass apply, often with an automated mass apply. So that's something I want you guys to think about. What is good friction? What degree of good friction should that be? And how does it actually, what does it look like? You know, from the candidate perspective, what does it actually look like to do this? The second point that I think we're going to try to uncover during the course of the conversations that we've had with this series is how do we actually tell authentic stories to people who are basically overwhelmed by information. Again, early chat we had today, we're at the point now where we're getting completely fried with information online. I don't know whether anybody feels it, but there's I no longer feel the inclination to look at my phone on the toilet anymore. It's a little bit of personal overshare, I know. But there was a time when I used that generally as a habit. I just don't want. I want to just zone out from the tech because it's overwhelming. And I think we're getting to the point where actually there's so much information to consume that something's happening in our brains. It's too much cognitive effort required to do it. We're disengaging. And we know this from marketing, don't we, Mel? We're actually very explicit with a lot of stuff that we say. People aren't reading that. They're just skipping through and doing kind of almost by habit what it is. And again, switch it to a recruitment context. You put a recruitment advert out, or you've got a bunch of instructions you want to give to candidates, or maybe you send an outreach message. Oftentimes people are not really reading through that script. There's a concept that it's worth touching on. I don't think we'll dive into it too deeply, but there's a really interesting cognitive phenomena called AI brain fry. Now, has anyone heard of this term prior to today? AI brain fry? Super interesting. It's the condition whereby people seem to be unable to, or I don't think it's inability, I think it's actually a reluctance to process AI generated content. There's a few features that come with artificial generated content. Number one, it's very long, right? It's a lot longer in terms of word count than a human typed bit of content, whether that's an email, whether it's a post, whether it's anything anything anybody's produced. There's a lot of information to consume. Now, before we knew what that was, we just basically interpreted that as, oh, this person has put a lot of effort to write this thing. This is a good quality piece of work. But I think we're all kind of getting past that. I'm past it. If I get a view that this is AI generated, my first instinct is to say, I'm not going to actually reciprocate and read this because the person generating it has not put the effort in to produce it. So why am I actually using my cognitive effort, which is finite? I'm a biological being. I need to feed my brain. I need to rest my brain. It's a finite amount of effort that I have. Why am I actually subjecting myself to this? I'm not going to process it. And this is actually one of the sort of conditions people have studied, and they've realized that this could be a huge problem within businesses because internally we're circulating information that is AI generated. Right? I'm sure if anybody working for a reasonable sized business that has a Slack channel or has something sort of where there's internal documentation, it's all kind of AI generated. And what you're forcing everyone else to do is to consume stuff that hasn't had effort to actually dare to produce. And that human effort leads to drainage, it leads to burnout, it leads to demotivation, and it leads to a resentment. Like if you've got one person in the business that's constantly sending you a lot of AI generated stuff and it looks productive, right? But he's asking you to actually absorb his or her productivity, and your time is being sucked away. This is why, by the way, this is, I think, one of the real reasons why the productivity paradox can be explained in this way. You know how everyone who uses AI can feel, hey, listen, I'm definitely more productive using artificial intelligence. I can produce more artifacts. I can do more, expansion of scope. I seem more capable. Doesn't translate into at the institutional level, because lots of companies are saying, where's the bottom line outcome of all of this AI sort of enablement? And the paradox, I think, can be explained in large part because the AI output from an individual creates a bottleneck for everyone else. You get me? So if I'm a person that's producing lots of AI output, individually looking very productive, ticking the box for me, therefore I'm motivated to do it, what I'm actually doing is forcing everyone else to absorb that. And that's causing them to be slow. Recruitment example would be very clear. Let's say I'm a recruiter, my job is to source candidates. I can immediately source 500 candidates that are qualified, they're amazing, I've already outreached to them. I'm going to pipe them into my recruitment system. My hiring managers are not going to have the time to book the interviews because I've overwhelmed a pre-AI system with an AI-enabled output. In other words, I've created a bottleneck, right? So this is why the overall system does not become productive. You're just having uncontrolled AI enablement across everyone, individual level. Anyway, AI brain fried. That's the condition that we're selling to, right? So if we're promoting jobs and we're trying to sell sort of the opportunity, we're dealing with basically a candidate community that's overwhelmed with information. How do we actually tell a story which cuts through that? How do we tell a story that's authentic, genuine, human-powered, and not sort of AI? Lots of different techniques to talk about, and in fact, Jim and Bri are the ones that are experts at doing this. How do you tell the authentic story? And I won't steal their thunder because they're going to talk a little bit more about it. But it is a topic I think we can all kind of think about and endorse. Okay, so I've stood here and lectured a little bit, probably too long, gone off a few tangents, so apologies for all of that. But we want to have a bit of structure to today. Structure is going to be, Brian's going to come up and give us a little bit of an overview as to what that vision is in terms of the future of storytelling. We've got Jim also going to come in to support our conversation in a moment. Then we're also going to get together in groups and discuss how do we create sort of, how do we actually take some of these abstract ideas and translate them into real world recruitment scenarios and then see whether we can produce solutions for them. So that's basically how the structure of the day is going to be. Should be super interactive. Feel free to interrupt anybody who's on stage. Stick your hand up or just yell out if you want. And we'll get on with what should be a really good afternoon.